Welcome to Book Buzz February edition. Sit back and listen to find out about some of the latest bestsellers that Billerica Public Library and Merrimack Valley Consortium have purchased for your enjoyment. Our first genre is contemporary fiction. Black Girls Must Be Magic by Jane Allen. For Tabitha Walker, her grandmother's old adage, black girls must die exhausted, is becoming all too true. Discovering she's pregnant after she was told she may not be able to have biological children, Tabitha throws herself headfirst into the world of single mothers by choice. Between her job, doctor's appointments, and preparing for the baby, she's worn out. And that's before her boss at the local news station starts getting complaints from viewers about Tabitha's natural hair. When an unexpected turn of events draws Mark, her on and off again boyfriend, back into her world with surprising demands, and the situation at work begins to threaten her livelihood and her identity, Tabitha must make some tough decisions about her and her baby's future. She must find a way to navigate motherhood on her own terms. Will she harness the bravery, strength, and self love she'll need to keep the village together, find her voice at work, and settle things with Mark before the baby arrives? Yerba Biana by Nina LaCour. When Sarah Foster runs away from home at 16, she leaves behind the girl she once was, capable of trust and intimacy. Years later in Los Angeles, she is a sought-after bartender, renowned as much for her brilliant cocktails as for the mystery that clings to her. Across the city, Emily is in a holding pattern, yearning for the beauty and community her Creole grandparents cultivated but unable to commit. On a whim, she takes a job arranging flowers at the glamorous restaurant Yuba Brianna and embarks on an affair with the married owner. The morning Emily and Sarah first meet at the restaurant, their connection is immediate, but the damage both women carry and the choices they have made pulls them apart again and again. When Sarah's old life catches up to her, upending everything she thought she wanted, just as Emily has finally gained her own sense of purpose, they must decide if their love is more powerful than their past. The Swimmers by Julie Otzka. The swimmers are unknown to one another except through their private routines, slow lane, medium lane, fast lane, and the solace each takes in their morning or afternoon laps. But when a crack appears at the bottom of the pool, they are cast out into an unforgiving world without comfort or relief. One of these swimmers is Alice, who is slowly losing her memory. For Alice, the pool was the final stand against the darkness of her growing dementia. Without the fellowship of her other swimmers and the routine of her daily laps, she's plunged into dislocation and chaos, swept into the memories of her childhood and the Japanese American internment camp in which she spent the war. Alice's estranged daughter, re entering her mother's life too late, witnesses her stark and devastating decline. The Fashion Orphans by Randy Sue Myers and M.J. Rose. Estranged half sisters, Gabrielle Winslow and Lulu Quartaro, have only two things in common: mounds of debt and Coyle's unresolved enemy towards their mother, Betty Bradford. Gabrielle, the firstborn, was raised in relative luxury on Manhattan's rarefied Upper East Side. Now at 55, her life as a Broadway costume designer married to a Broadway producer has exploded in divorce. Lulu, who has spent half of her childhood under the tutelage of her working-class Brooklyn grandparents, is a grieving widow at 48, with her two sons grown and working at the Dimas Park Bakery owned by her late husband's family. The two sisters arrive for the reading of their mother's will, expecting to divide a sizable inheritance, pay off their debts, and then again turn their backs on each other. But to their shock, what they have been left is their mother's secret walk-in closet jammed with high-end, current, and vintage designer clothes and accessories, most from Chanel. But as they begin to explore their mother's collection, meet and fall in love with her group of warm, wonderful friends, and magically find inspiring messages tucked away in her treasures. The Liz Taylor Ring by Brenda Jankwitz. In 1978, Lizzie Morgan and Richie Schneider embarked on a whirlwind romance on the bright beaches and glamorous yachts of Long Island. Over the years, the relationship had its shares of ups and downs, including a 9-month hiatus that ends with the stunning 11-carat ring, one that looks just like the diamond Richard Burton gifted Liz Taylor after their own separation. Like the famous couple, despite the drama that would unfold throughout the Schneider's marriage, the ring would be there as a symbol of their love until it wasn't. Decades later, when the lost ring unexpectedly resurfaces, the Schneider's 3 children gather under one roof for the first time in years, eager to get their hands on this beloved, expensive reminder of their departed parents. But determining the fate of the heirloom is no simple task, unearthing old wounds and heartaches the siblings can't ignore. And when the ring reveals a secret that challenges everything they thought they knew about their parents' epic love story, they'll have to decide whether to move forward as a family or let the ring break them once and for all. Our second genre is historical fiction. The Last Grand Duchess by Bryn Turnbull. Grand Duchess Olga Romanov comes of age amid the shifting tide for the great dynasties of Europe. But even as unrest simmers in the capital, Olga is content to live within the confines of the sheltered life her parents have built for her and her 3 sisters. Hiding from the world on account of their mother's ill health and their brother Alexei's secret affliction and rising controversy over Father Rasputin, the priest on whom the Tarsinas have come to rely. But as war approaches, the palaces of Russia are transformed. Olga and her sisters trade their gowns for nursing habits, assisting in surgeries and tending to the wounded bodies and minds of Russia's military. As troubling rumors about her parents trickle in from front, Olga dares to hope that a budding romance might survive whatever the future may hold. But when tensions run high and supplies run low, the controversy over Rasputin grows into a fury protest and calls for revolution to threaten the end of 300 years of Romanov rule. The Next Ship Home by Heather Webb. Ellis Island, 1902. 2 women band together to hold America to its promise. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. A young Italian woman arrives on the shores of America, her sights set on a better life. The same day, a young American woman reports to her first day of work at the immigration center. But Ellis Island isn't a refuge for Francesca or Elma, not when ships depart every day with those who are refused entry to the country and when corruption ripples through every corridor. While Francesca resorts to desperate measures to ensure she will make it off the island, Elma fights for her dreams of becoming a translator, even as women are denied the chance. As the 2 women face the misdeeds of a system known to manipulate and abuse immigrants searching for new hope in America, they form an unlikely friendship and share a terrible secret, altering their fates and the lives of the immigrants who come after them. City of Incurable Women by Maud Casey is a brilliant exploration of the type of female bodily and psychic pain once commonly diagnosed as hysteria, and curiously historical response to what's commonly exhibited by medical men. Maud Casey has brought us complex flesh and blood people with stories to tell. These linked, evocative prose portraits, accompanied by period photographs and metal documents, both authentic and invented, restore the humanity to the 19th century female psychiatric patients confined in a Paris hospital and reduced to specimens for study by the celebrated neurologist Jean-Martin Charot and his male colleagues. The Wind Whistling in the Cranes by Lydia George. Set in 1990s, it tells the story of landlords and tenants of derelict canning factory in southern Portugal. The wealthy and always scheming Leandros have owned the building since the Carnation Revolution, a peaceful coup that toppled a 4-decade-long dictatorship and led to Portugal's withdrawal from its African colonies. It was Donna Regina Leandro, who handed the keys to the Mattis, the bustling family from Cape Verde, who saw past the dusty machinery and converted the space into warm and welcoming home. When Donna Regina is found dead outside the factory on a holiday weekend, Her body is covered in black ants. Her granddaughter, Minel, investigates. She approaches the factory riddled with anxiety. Hours later, the Matters return home to find this strange girl hiding behind their clotheslines, and with caution, they take her in. Days later, the Leonardos realize that Manila has become hopelessly entangled with their tenants, and their fear of political and financial ruin sets off a series of events that threatens to uproot the lives of everyone involved. The Christie Affair by Nina DeGamont. Every story has its secrets. Every mystery has its motives. A long time ago in another country, I nearly killed a woman. It's a particular feeling, an urge to murder. It takes over your body so completely. It's like a divine force grabbing hold of your will, your limbs, your psyche. That's the joy of it. In retrospect, it's frightening. But I dare say at the moment it feels sweet, the way justice feels sweet. The greatest mystery wasn't Agatha Christie's disappearance in those 11 infamous days. It's what she discovered. London, 1925. In a world of townhomes and tennis matches and socialites and shooting parties, Miss Nan O'Dare became Archie Christie's mistress, luring him away from his devoted and well-known wife, Agatha Christie. The question is why? Why destroy another woman's marriage? Why hatch a plot years in the making? And why murder? And how was Nano Day so intricately tied to those 11 mysterious days that Agatha Christie went missing? Circus of Wonders by Elizabeth McNeil. Step up, step up. In the 1860s, England, circus mania is sweeping the nation. Crowds jostle for glimpses of the lion tamers, the dazzling trapeze artists, and the most thrilling of all, the so-called human wonders. When Jasper Jupiter's Circus of Wonders pitches its tent in a poor coastal town, the life of one young girl changes forever. Sold to the ringmaster as a leper girl because of the birthmarks that covered her body, Nell is utterly devastated. But as she grows close to the other performers, she finds herself enchanted by the glittering freedom of the circus and by her own role as the queen of the moon and stars. Before long, Nell's fame spreads across the world, and with it, a chance for Jasper to grow his own name and fortune. But what happens when her fame begins to eclipse his own? When even Jasper's loyal brother Toby becomes captivated by Nell. No longer the quiet flower picker, Nell knows her own place in the world, and she will fight for it. Our third genre is fantasy. Dawn Trod by Brandon Sanderson. When a ghost ship is discovered, its crew presumed dead after trying to reach the storm-shrouded island, Akana, Nirvana must send an expedition to make sure the island hasn't fallen into enemy hands. Knights Radiant who fly too near find their stormlight suddenly drained, so the voyage must be by sea. Ship overruns, lost the use of her legs, but gained the companionship of Shilshil, a stormlight ingesting wing haken, a species once thought extinct. Now Rin's pet is ill, and any hope for Shilshil recovery can be found only at the ancestral home of the Lakan, Akan. With the help of Lopin and formerly one-armed Windrunner, Rins must accept Nirvana's quest and sail into the perilous storm from which no one has returned alive. If the crew cannot uncover the secrets of the hidden island city before the wrath of its ancient guardians fall upon them, the fate of Rosha and the entire Cosmere hangs in the balance. Moon Witch Spider King by Marlon James. Sugalon, the Moon Witch, proved a worthy adversary to Tracker as they clashed across the mythical African landscape in search of a mysterious boy who disappeared. Sugalon gives her own account of what happened to that boy and how she plotted and fought and triumphed and failed as she looked for them. It's also the story of a century-long feud seen through the eyes of a 177-year-old witch that Sugalon had with SS, the Chancellor to the King. It is said that SS works so closely with the king that together they are like 8 limbs of one spider. SS power is considerable and deadly. It takes brains and courage to challenge him, which Longla does for reasons of her own. Scorpica by G.R. McAllister. 500 years of peace between queendoms shatters when girls stop being born. As the drought of the girls stretches across a generation, it sets off a cascade of political and personal consequences across all five queendoms of the known world, throwing long standing alliances into disarray as each queendom begins to turn on each other and new threats to each nation rise from within. This gripping epic fantasy follows a warrior queen who must rise from childbirth bred to fight for her life and her throne, a healer in hiding, desperate to protect the secret of her daughter's explosive power, a queen whose desperation to retain control leads her to risk using the darkest magic, a near immortal sorcerer, a demigod powerful enough to remake the world for her own ends, and the generation of last born girls, the ones born just before the drought, who must bear the hopes and the traditions of their nations if the queendoms are to survive. A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. Jack hasn't stepped foot on Cadence in 10 long years, content to study music at the mainland university. But when young girls start disappearing from the Isle, Jack is summoned home to help find them. Enchantments run deep on Cadence. Gossip is carried by the wind. Plaid shawls can be as strong as armor, and the smallest cut of a knife can instill fear. The spirits that rule the Isle by fire, water, earth, and wind find mirth in the lives of the humans who call land home. Adara, the heiress of the East and Jack's childhood enemy, knows the spirits only answer to the bard's music, and she hopes Jack can draw them forth by song, enticing them to return the missing girls. As Jack and Adara reluctantly work together, they find they make better allies than rivals as their partnership turns into something more. But with each passing song, it becomes apparent that the trouble with the spirits is far more sinister than they first expected. And an older, darker secret about Cadence lurks beneath the surface, threatening to undo them all. Our fourth genre is science fiction. Clean Air by Sarah Blake. The climate acropolis has come and gone, and in the end, it wasn't the temperature climbing or the waters rising, it was the trees. The world became overgrown, creating enough pollen to render the air unbreathable. In a decade since the event known as the Turning, humanity has rebuilt, and the Isabel has gotten used to the airtight domes that now contain her life. She raises her young daughter Cami and attempts to make peace with her mother's death. She tries hard to be satisfied with this safe, prosperous new world, but instead just feels stuck. And then the peace of her town is shattered. Someone starts slashing through domes at night, exposing people to the deadly pollen. A serial killer. Almost simultaneous, Kimi begins sleep talking, having whole conversations about the murders that she doesn't remember after she wakes. Isabel becomes fixated on the killer, on both tracking him down and understanding him. What could compel someone to take so many lives? Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton. Dying isn't any fun, but at least it's a living. Mickey 7 is an expendable, disposable employee on a human expedition sent to colonize the ice world Niflheim. Whenever there's a mission that's too dangerous or even suicidal, the crew turns to Mickey. After one iteration dies, a new body is regenerated with most of his memories intact. After six deaths, Mickey 7 understands the term of his deal and why it was the only colonel position unfilled when he took it. On a fairly routine scouting mission, Mickey 7 goes missing and is presumed dead. By the time he returns to the colony base, surprisingly held back by native life, Mickey 7's fate has been sealed. There's a new clone, Mickey 8, reporting for expendable duties. The idea of a duplicate expendable is universally loathed, and if caught, they will likely be thrown into the recycler for protein. Mickey 7 must keep his double secret from the rest of the colony. Meanwhile, life on Nephilim is getting worse. The atmosphere is unsuitable for humans, the food is in short supply, and terraforming is growing poorly. The native species are growing curious about their new neighbors, and that curiosity has made Commander Marshall very afraid. Ultimately, the survival of both life forms will come down to Mickey 7. That is, if he can just keep from dying for good. Redwood and Wildfire by Andrea Hairston. At the turn of the 20th century, minstrel shows transformed into vaudeville, which slides into moving pictures. Hunkering together in dark theaters, diverse audience marvel at flickering images. Redwood, an African American woman, and Aidan, and Summerall Irishmen, journey from Georgia to Chicago, from the haunted swampland to a city of the future. They are gifted performers and hoodoo conjurers struggling to call up the wondrous world they imagine, not just on the stage and screen, but on city streets, in front parlors, and wounded hearts. The power of hoodoo is the power of the community that believes in its capacity to heal. Living in a system stacked against them, Redwood and Aiden's power and talent are torment and joy. Their search for a place to be who they want to be is an exhilarating, powerful, magical adventure. Our fifth genre is romance. A Letter to Three Witches by Elizabeth Bass. Nearly a century ago, Gwen Ingall's great great grandfather cast a spell with horrible side effects. As a result, the Grand Council of Witches forbade his descendants from practicing witchcraft. The council even planted an anonymous snitches called watchers in the community to report any spell casting. Yet magic may still be alive and not so well in Zambia. Gwen and her cousins, Trudy and Milo, receive a letter from Gwen's adopted sister, Tenet, informing them that she's bewitched one of their partners and will run away with him at the end of the week. While Gwen frets about whether to trust her scientist boyfriend, currently out of town on a beetle studying trip, she's worried that the local grad student, Jeremy, is secretly a watcher doing his own research. Cousin Trudy is so stressed that she accidentally enchants her cupcakes, creating havoc among her bakery customers in her marriage. Perhaps it's time the family took back control and figured out how to harness their powers. How else can Gwen decide whether her growing feelings for Jeremy are real or the results of too many of Trudy's cupcakes? Count Your Lucky Stars by Alexandria Bellafiore. Margot Cooper doesn't do relationships. She tried and it blew up her face, so she'll stick with her casual hookups. Thank you very much. But now her entire crew has found the one, and she's beginning to feel like a fifth whale. And then fate intervenes. While touring wedding venues with her engaged friends, Margot comes face to face with Olivia Grant, her childhood friend, her first love, and her first, well, everything. It's been 10 years, but the moment they lock eyes, Margot's cold and dead heart bumps in her chest. Olivia must be hallucinating. In the decade since she last saw Margot, her life hasn't gone exactly as planned. At almost 30, she'd been married, divorced. However, a wedding planner job in Seattle means a fresh start and a chance to follow her dreams. Never in a million years did she expect her important new client, best woman, would be the one that got away. When a series of unfortunate events leaves Olivia without a place to stay, Margot offers up her spare room because she's a very good person, obviously. It has nothing to do with the fact that Olivia is as beautiful as ever, and the sparks between them still make Margot tingle. As they spend time in close quarters, Margot starts to question her no string stance. Olivia is everything she's ever wanted, but Margot let her in once and it ended in disaster. Will history repeat itself, or should she count her lucky stars that she gets a second chance with her first love? One Night on the Island by Josie Silver. Spending her 30th birthday alone is not what dating columnist Cleo Wilder wanted, but she plans a solo retreat at the assistance of her boss in the name of re-energizing herself and adding a new perspective to her column. The remote Irish island she booked is a far cry from London, but at least it's a chance to hunker down in a luxury cabin and indulge in some self care while she figures out the next steps in her love life and her career. Max Sullivan is also looking forward to some time to himself. With his life in Boston falling apart in ways he can't bring himself to acknowledge, his soul searching has brought him to the same Irish island to explore his roots and to find some clarity. Unfortunately, a mix-up with the bookings meant both have reserved the same one-room hideaway on exactly the same dates. Instantly at odds, Cleo and Mac don't know how they're going to manage until the next weekly ferry arrives. But as the days go by, they no longer seem to mind each other's company quite as much as they thought they would. The Lady's Mind by Francine Rivers, 1875. When Catherine Walsh arrives in tiny Calvada, a mining town nestled in the Sierra Nevadas, falling in love is the farthest thing from her mind. Banished from Boston by her wealthy stepfather, she has come to claim an inheritance from the uncles she never knew. A defunct newspaper office on the main street overflowing with brothels and saloons, and a seemingly worthless mine. Moved by the oppression of local miners and their families, Catherine decides to relaunch her uncle's newspaper and then finds herself pitted against Calvada's most powerful men. But Catherine intends to continue to say and publish whatever she pleases, especially when she knows she's right. Matthias Beck, owner of the local saloon and hotel, has a special interest in the new lady in town. He instantly recognizes C.T. Walsh's same determination in the beautiful and outspoken redhead, and knows all too well how dangerous that family trait can be. While Catherine may be right about Cavada's problems, her righteousness could also get her killed. But when the handsome hoteler keeps finding himself on the same side of the issues as the opinionated Miss Walsh, Matthew's restlessness search for a purpose becomes all about answering the call of his heart. Everyone may be looking to strike it rich in the lawless boomtown, but it's a love more precious than gold that will ultimately save them all. Our sixth genre is mystery and suspense. The Lady in the Silver Cloud by David Handler. A 1955 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud is an expensive car, especially in the pristine condition of the one owned by Muriel Cantrell. Living in a luxury apartment building on Central Park West, the delicate, sweet 75-year-old woman is a neighbor of Merle Nash, the beautiful movie star, and Stuart Hogue, whose first book was a sensation, but whose career crashed when he became involved with drugs and alcohol. Divorced 10 years earlier, Hoagie had been welcomed back into Molly's life and apartment. Apparently universally beloved in her building, residents are shocked when Muriel is murdered after a Halloween party. No one takes it harder than her longtime chauffeur, Bullet Struman, whose previous job was an enforcer for the mob. Who in the world would want to harm the silver-haired lady whose major vices were buying shoes and Chanel suits, always in cash, and watching daytime soap operas? Lieutenant Romain Berry of the NYPD is called to investigate and again seeks help from his friend Hoagie, who, along with his basset hound Lulu, has been invaluable aid in the past. The investigation leads to an unexpected source of Muriel's wealth, the history of her early years as a hat-check girl at the Copacabana, and how her chauffeur came to be called Bullets, her desperate meth head nephew, and her wealthy neighbors who have secrets of their own. Survivor's Guilt by Robin Jiggle. At first, the death of millionaire businessman Charles Parsons seems like a straightforward suicide. There's no sign of forced entry or a struggle in his lavish New Jersey mansion, just a single gunshot wound from his own weapon. But days later, a different story emerges. Computer techs pick up voice recording that incriminates Parsons' adopted daughter, Anne, who duly confesses and pleads guilty. Erin McCabe has little interest in reviewing such a slam dunk case, even after she has a mysterious meeting with one of the investigating detectives, who reveals that Anne, like Erin, is a trans woman. Yet, despite their misgivings, Erin and her law partner, Dwayne, ultimately can't ignore the pieces that don't fit. As their investigation deepens, Erin and Swish convince Anne to withdraw her guilty plea. But Anne clearly knows more than she's willing to share, even if it means a life sentence. Who is she protecting and why? Fighting against time and a prosecutor hell-bent on notching another conviction, and the two work tirelessly. Erin inside the courtroom, Swish in the field to clear Anne's name. But despite Parsons' former associates' determination to keep his and their own illegal activities buried, a horrifying truth emerges: a web of human exploitation, unchecked greed, and murder. Soon a quest to see justice served becomes desperate struggle to survive. Abandoned in Death by J.D. Robb. The woman's body was found in the early morning on a bench in New York City playground. She was clean, her hair was neatly arranged, her makeup carefully applied, but other things were very wrong, like the tattoo and piercings clearly new, the clothes decades out of date, the fatal wound hidden beneath the ribbon around her neck, and the note, "Bad Mummy," written in crayon as if by a child. Eve Dallas turns to the department's top profiler, who confirms what seems obvious to Eve. They're dealing with a killer whose childhood involved some sort of trauma, a situation Eve is all too familiar with herself. Yet the clues suggest a killer would be roughly 60 years old, and there are no records of old crimes with similar MO. What was the trigger that apparently reopened such an old wound and sent someone over the edge? When Eve discovers that other young women who physically resemble the first victim have vanished, the clock starts ticking louder. But to solve this case, she will need to find a way into the hidden place of a dim light and concrete, into the distant past, and into the cold depths of a shattered mind. The Wrong Woman by Leanne Kale Sparks. The only survivor of Denver's notorious Reaper serial murders, FBI Special Agent Kendall Beck grapples with ghosts of her past by seeking justice for victims of abuse. She's neck deep in a particularly ugly case involving the disappearance of 5-year-old Emily Williams, but her investigation is derailed when her best friend and roommate, Gwen, turns up dead floating in a nearby lake. Shocked and stunned by the news of Gwen's death, Kendall teams up with Denver detective Adam Taylor to find the killer. Gwen's fiance, Ty Butler, is being evasive about the last time he saw Gwen, and as the evidence mounts against him, he's arrested for the murder. With every new clue, Kendall questions how well she really knew her friend, and when Gwen's dark secrets begin spilling out one by one, she begins to understand the devastating magnitude of her murder. The Reaper has returned to Denver, and he's not stopping at just one victim. As the trauma of Kendall's past comes roaring back, she and Adam have no time to spare before more bodies start piling up. And then Kendall makes a shocking discovery that reveals the horrifying truth behind Emily Williams' disappearance. Now, Kendall must confront her darkest fears as she and the Reaper face off one more time. The Family Kale by Lan Samantha Chang. The residents of Haven, Wisconsin have dined on the fine Kale restaurant's delicious Americanized Chinese food for 35 years, content to ignore any unsavory whispers about the family owners. Whether or not Big Leo is honest or his wife Winnie is happy, their food tastes good and their 3 sons earn scholarships to respectable colleges. But when the brothers reunite in Haven, the Chow's family secret and simmering resentment erupt at last. Before long, Leo is found dead, soon murdered, and his sons find them drawn in the exacting gaze of the entire town. The ensuing trial begins to light potential motives for all 3 brothers. Dagu, the restaurant's reckless head chef; Ming, financially successful but personally tortured; and the youngest, gentlest, but lost college student, James. As the spotlight on the brothers tighten and the family dog meets an unexpected fate, Dago, Ming, and James must reckon with the legacy of their fathers' outsized appetites and their own future survival. A Game of Fear by Charles Todd. Spring 1921. Scotland Yard sends Inspector Ian Rutledge to the sea-battered village of Walmer on the coast of Essex, where amongst the salt flats and military airfield lies Benton Abbey, a grand manor with storied past. The lady of the house may prove his most bewildering witness yet. She claims she saw a violent murder, but there is no body, no blood. She also insists she recognized the killer, Captain Nelson, only it could not be Nelson because he died during the war. Everyone in the village believes that Lady Benton's losses have turned her mind. She is, after all, a grieving widow and mother. But the woman Rutledge interviews is rational and self possessed. And then there is Captain Nelson. What really happened to him in the war? The more Rutledge delves into the baffling case, the more suspicious tragedies he uncovers. The Abbey and the airfield hold their secrets tightly until Rutledge arrives and a new trail of death follows. Diablo Mesa by Preston and Child. Lucas Tappan, a wealthy and eccentric billionaire and founder of the Icarus space system, approaches the Santa Fe Archaeological Institute with an outlandish proposal to finance a careful scientific excavation of Roswell incident site where a UFO is alleged to have crashed in 1947. A skeptical Nora Kelly, to her great annoyance, is tasked with the job. Nora's excavation immediately uncovers two murder victims buried at the site, faces and hands obliterated with acid to erase their identities. Special Agent Corey Swanson is assigned to the case. As Nora's excavation proceeds, uncovering things both bizarre and seemingly incompatible, Corey's homicide investigation throws open a Pandora's box of espionage and violence, uncovering bloody traces of powerful force that will stop at nothing to protect its secrets, and that threatens to engulf them all in an unimaginable fate. The Cage by Bonnie Kistler. On a cold, misty Sunday night, two women are alone in the offices of Claudine de Martineau International. One is the company's human resources director, impeccably dressed, perfectly coiffed as she sits at her desk and stares somberly out the window. Down the hall, her colleague, one of the company's lawyers, is buried under a pile of paperwork, frantically rushing to finish. Leaving at the same time, the two women, each preoccupied by their own thoughts, enter the elevator that will take them down to the 30th floor. When they arrive at the lobby, one woman is dead. Was it murder or suicide? The Goodbye Coast by Joe Ide. Philip Marlowe is vividly reimagined in present-day Los Angeles. Here is a city of scheming actresses, ruthless gang members, and washed-out police. Marlowe is a quiet, lonely, remarkable, capable, and confident private detective. Though he lives beneath the shadow of his father, a once decorated LAPD homicide detective, famous throughout the city, who's given in to drink after the death of Marlowe's mother. Marlowe, against his better judgment, accepts two missing person cases. The first, a daughter of a faded Hollywood starlet, and the second, a British child stolen from his mother by his father. At the center of Goodbye Coast is Marlowe's troubled and confounding relationship with his father, a son who despises yet respects his dad, and a dad who's unable to hide his bitter disappointment with his grown boy. The Midnight Ride by Ben Mesrick. The Card Shark. Haley Gordon is looking to make some fast cash to help pay tuition when she's caught counting cards at the Encore Casino in Boston. She grabs her winnings and makes her escape. With guards closing in, she dives into an unlocked room to hide, only to find a dead body. The ex-con. Recently released from prison, Nick Patterson hasn't felt hope in a long time, but the job he inherited in prison promises to change that. He enters hotel room 633 to find that the person he was supposed to meet has been murdered. Next to the corpse stands a terrified young woman, Haley Gordon. The Professor. American history professor Adrian Jensen learns of the death of his professional enemy, Charles Walker. The night after he receives Walker's latest research, skeptical at first, Adrian nearly deletes the file. But when one small new detail catches his eye, he makes it his mission to uncover what could be one of the biggest secrets of the Revolutionary War. All three strangers find themselves on the cusp of an incredible discovery. One, that someone is willing to kill to keep buried. The Violence by Delilah S. Dawson. When Chelsea Martin kisses her husband hello at the door of their perfect home, a chilled bottle of beer in hand and dinner on the table, she may look like the ideal wife, mother, and homemaker. But in fact, she's following an unwritten rule book. Carefully navigating David's stormy moods in a desperate nightly bid to avoid catastrophe. If family time doesn't go exactly the way David wants it, bad things happen to Chelsea and to the couple's 17-year-old daughter, Ella. Cut off from all support, controlled and manipulated for years, Chelsea has no resources and no one to turn to. Her wealthy mother, Patricia, would rather focus on the dust on her chandelier than acknowledge Chelsea bruises. After all, Patricia's life looks perfect on the surface, too. But the pretense crumbles when a mysterious condition overtakes the nation, known as the violence. It causes the infected to experience sudden explosive bursts of animalistic rage and attack anyone in their path. The ensuing chaos brings opportunity for Chelsea and inspires a plan to liberate herself and her family once and for all. Our last genre is nonfiction. Off the Edge by Kelly Whale. Since 2015, there has been a spectacular boom in a nearly 200-year-old delusion. The idea that we all live on a flat plane, under a solid dome, ringed by an impossible wall of ice. It is the ultimate in conspiracy theories, a wholesale rejection of everything we know to be true about the world in which we live. Where did this idea come from? Wills draws a straight line from today's conspiracies back to the early days of flat earth theory in the 1830s, showing that human impulses behind divergencies in belief, faced with a complicated world out of our individual control, we naturally seek patterns to explain the inexplicable. The only difference between then and now, social media. And powered by Facebook and YouTube, the flat earth movement is growing. A Taste for Poison by Neil Bradbury. As any reader of murder mysteries can tell you, poison is one of the most enduring and popular weapons of choice for a scheming murderer. It can be slipped into a drink, smeared onto a tip of an arrow, or a handle of a door, even filtered through the air we breathe. But how exactly do these poisons work to break our bodies down? And what can we learn from the damage they inflict? In a fascinating blend of popular science, medical history, and true crime, Dr. Neil Bradbury explores the most morbidly captivating method of murder from the cellular level. Alongside real accounts of murderers and their crimes, some notorious, some forgotten, some still unsolved, are the equally compelling stories of the poisons involved. 11 molecules of death that work their way through the human body. The Lonely Hunter by Amy Lukin. One evening, 30 something writer Amy Lukin found herself at a dinner party surrounded by couples. When the conversation turned to her love life, Amy stated simply, I don't really know if I'm going to date anyone ever again. Some people are just alone forever. Her friends rushed to assure her that love comes when you least expect it and to make recommendations for a new dating apps. But Amy wondered why, when there are more unmarried adults than ever before, is there so much pressure to couple up? Why does everyone treat me as though my real life won't start until I find a partner? Isn't this my real life, the one I'm living right now? Is there something wrong with me, or is there something wrong with our culture? Over the course of the next year, Amy set out to answer these questions and to see if there really was some trick to escaping loneliness. She went on hundreds of dates, read the sociologists, authors, and relationship expert, exploring singlehood and loneliness, dove into the wellness industrial complex, tossed it all aside to binge watch Netflix and to eat nachos, and probed the capitalist structures that make alternate family arrangements nearly impossible. 52 Ways to Walk by Annabelle Streets. We think we know how to walk. After all, walking is one of the very first skills we learn. But many of us are stuck in our walking routines, forever walking in the same place, in the same way, for the same time, with the same people. With a thought provoking and evidence backed weekly walk routine, 52 Ways to Walk will encourage everyone to improve how they walk, while also encouraging them to seek out new locations, many on their own doorsteps. New walking companions, our brains age better when we mix up our fellow walkers. New times of the day and night, and new skills to acquire while walking.